I gave up a full-ride PhD, moved states, and built his dream from scratch because he promised we were building a future together. 5 years later, he called my work cute, then deleted every trace of it from our shared drive. That's when I stopped being his support system and started becoming something he'd never see coming. I always believed in the kind of partnership where both people grow, where we carry each other's dreams like delicate glass, side by side. That's what I thought we had. My dream was to become a philosophy professor. I loved ideas, writing, the long silences of study. I had just finished my master's and was preparing to apply for a doctoral program in Boston. When Daniel got the job offer in Chicago, everything shifted. It's a fast track to VP, he told me, his eyes burning with ambition. Just give me 3 years, then we'll focus on your career. He said we like it was shared, like he meant it. I was 29. My name is Lena Hayes. 4 years into our marriage, we were still chasing the life we pictured back in our college apartment, the one where we both made something of ourselves. I told myself love meant compromise. And so, I packed up my books and my dreams and followed him. At first, it felt temporary. I tutored high schoolers online, helped him review reports after work, made the apartment ours. He left early, came home late, and I told myself this sacrifice had purpose. Every evening, I told myself, next year, my turn. But time is a thief when you're waiting. 3 years turned into 5. Somewhere in that fog, I lost track of the woman who used to spend hours in the campus library, sketching out lecture ideas on yellow legal pads, and somehow my dream became a joke he told at parties. She wanted to read Nietzsche for a living, Daniel would say, laughing over a glass of Pinot as his colleagues smiled politely. I laughed too, quietly. One night, while cleaning out a drawer, I found an old notebook. It was from grad school, half filled with scribbled lecture notes and quotes I loved. I sat on the floor with it for hours, flipping through the pages like they belonged to someone else. It was the first time I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in years. I didn't act on it, not yet, but something inside me had stirred. Something small, sharp, and quietly waiting. The move to Chicago was quick. Daniel's company arranged everything: a high-rise rental, relocation bonus, even a company car. I remember standing in our new apartment, surrounded by boxes, trying to picture a future I hadn't chosen. In the early months, I tried to keep busy. I explored the neighborhood, decorated the apartment, even joined a book club, but every attempt felt like a placeholder, a way to pass time until Daniel was ready to remember his promise. He worked late, often past 9 p.m. Sometimes he wouldn't call. I'd leave dinner warm in the oven, then wrap it up and put it away. He said he was exhausted. I said I understood. That became our language, me understanding, him promising. I applied for adjunct positions at local colleges, but heard nothing back. Eventually, I stopped trying. I took freelance editing gigs, ghost wrote a few academic papers, even considered getting certified as a teacher. I told myself reinvention was a sign of strength. Daniel didn't discourage me, not directly, but he never asked about the things I was doing either. When I told him I'd edited a published essay on epistemology, he blinked and said, "That's great, babe," then went back to checking his emails. The nights grew longer. At parties, I became Daniel's wife. He introduced me with a vague nod toward my education, always followed by, "She's between things right now," as if I were a delayed shipment. I smiled through it. I got good at smiling. One evening, we hosted his team for dinner. I spent the whole day cooking, setting the table just right. After dessert, I tried to join a conversation about ethics and corporate culture, something I actually knew quite a bit about. One of his co-workers interrupted me mid-sentence. "She's a deep thinker," Daniel said, clinking his glass. "That's why I keep her around." Everyone laughed, including me. I always laughed when I wanted to cry. The truth was, I had become invisible, not just to Daniel, but to myself. The outlines of who I used to be Lena Hayes, aspiring professor, fierce debater, curious writer, had started to blur. I remember one morning I stood in front of the mirror and didn't recognize the woman looking back. I had cut my hair short, the way Daniel liked it. I wore the pearl earrings his mother gave me. And for a second, I felt like a character in someone else's story. But then I blinked and pushed the thought away. Because if I stopped long enough to admit what I'd lost, I wasn't sure I could bear it. Back then, I still believed he meant well. That one day, he'd look over at me and see the sacrifice, that he'd remember the nights I proofread his presentations, or the times I held him through anxiety attacks before big meetings. I believed marriage was give and take. I just hadn't realized I was the only one giving. It was a Thursday when I found the messages. Daniel had left his laptop open on the kitchen counter. He was in the shower. I wasn't snooping, at least not intentionally, but I saw the pop-up, bright and unmissable. Last night was amazing. I can still taste you. It was from someone named Avery. I froze. For a second, I actually wondered if it was spam, a phishing attempt. But when I clicked, on instinct, on reflex, what I found was not a scam. It was a thread, a long, vivid, months-long exchange. Pictures, weekend plans, inside jokes I didn't understand. He called her Sunbeam, said he hadn't laughed this much in years. My hands went numb, my legs too. I heard the water still running in the shower, steady and indifferent. The walls didn't move, the earth didn't shake, but something in me splintered. When he came out, I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I handed him the laptop, said nothing, and walked out the front door. I sat in the park for 3 hours. No coat. It was March, cold and gray. I stared at nothing, my mind blank. Then I went home. He was waiting, pale, pacing. It didn't mean anything, he started. I said nothing. It was just, look, you've been so distant, so focused on your books and tutoring and all that stuff. I didn't know where we were anymore. I didn't argue. I just listened. Because deep down, I already knew. The betrayal didn't begin with Avery. It began years ago, with every dinner he skipped, every promise he postponed, every time he laughed at my dreams like they were childish hobbies. I wanted to leave. I even packed a bag. But where would I go? I had no income of my own, no nearby family. My savings had slowly bled into our life together. Groceries, rent, his work trips. So I stayed. Not because I forgave him, but because I needed a plan. A week later, he deleted the messages. He suggested therapy. He brought home flowers, but something in his tone had changed. Less guilt, more irritation, like he was tired of apologizing. 2 months passed. We went to one therapy session. He talked over me the whole time. Then came the second betrayal. I was working on an application for a writing fellowship, a small competitive grant that could have reignited my academic path. I needed samples of past work. I knew they were saved on our shared drive, old essays, lecture outlines, papers I'd edited. But when I checked, the folder was gone. Every file deleted. I asked him about it. His answer was chillingly simple. I thought you didn't need them anymore, he said. You haven't touched that stuff in years. I stared at him. My chest felt tight. You thought I didn't need them? He shrugged. It was just clutter. We needed space. You said you were done with all that. I never said that. You didn't have to. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table, alone, staring at the empty folders on my screen. It wasn't just files he had erased. It was years of me, my voice, my work, the remnants of the person I had been. And he did it like it was nothing. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't carelessness. This was control. It hadn't happened all at once. It was slow, quiet, polite. Death by 1,000 small dismissals. But now I was awake. And I was done waiting. In the weeks that followed, something inside me settled, like dust after a long storm. I didn't explode. I didn't make speeches or demands. I just stopped speaking unless I had to. Daniel noticed the silence, but not the reason behind it. He mistook it for sulking. I let him. There was a numbness that wrapped around my day to day. I still made the coffee, still folded the laundry, still replied to emails, but I moved through it all like I was watching someone else live my life. Until one afternoon when I found my old flash drive. It was buried in a drawer beneath expired insurance papers and faded postcards. When I plugged it in, I didn't expect much. But there they were, several essays, some reading lists, even a rough draft of my teaching statement from grad school. I sat staring at the screen for a long time, then opened a document and read it slowly, like a letter from an old friend. That night, for the first time in years, I wrote something for myself. It was rough, clunky, but mine. I didn't tell Daniel. I began setting my alarm an hour earlier, writing while the apartment was still dark and quiet. I found an online academic forum, began reconnecting with people I hadn't spoken to since school. No one knew what was happening behind closed doors. I didn't need them to. I wasn't rebuilding my life yet, but I was beginning to remember what it had looked like. Daniel remained consumed by work. If he noticed the shift, he didn't say. He had affairs to manage, travel plans to finalize. One evening, while he was out, I signed up for an online certification course in ethics education. It was small, manageable, but symbolic. The guilt that used to choke me when I chose myself, it was fading. What replaced it wasn't anger, not yet, but clarity. I stopped explaining myself, stopped trying to earn back his attention. He had discarded me slowly, so I would rebuild myself quietly. I stopped reacting. I listened. I planned. By May, I had written 3 essays and started compiling a digital teaching portfolio. I reached out to a former professor who now chaired a department at a small liberal arts college in Maine. "We're launching a new visiting scholar program," she said. "Send me your materials." I told her I would. I didn't tell Daniel anything at all. This wasn't revenge yet. It was still recovery. But I had crossed an invisible line, and once I crossed it, I never looked back. By summer, I had a rhythm. Mornings were mine, writing, studying, emailing, reading. I found joy in small victories. An email reply from a scholar I admired, an invite to contribute to a philosophy blog, a comment thread on my teaching post that sparked actual discourse. These weren't fireworks, but they were mine. Daniel remained distracted by work, late-night calls, and networking events that always ran too long. I stopped asking where he was. I no longer needed the answer. I opened a separate bank account, something I hadn't done in years. Quietly, I started accepting freelance academic editing jobs again. Every dollar I earned, I saved. I told him I was doing a bit of consulting, and he nodded, barely listening. That suited me just fine. There was a symbolic power in every click, every invoice, every login to an identity I'd once buried. I started sketching ideas for a virtual lecture series on ethics and autonomy, something small at first, a passion project, but my former professor encouraged me to think bigger. "You're already doing the work," she said. "Just formalize it." So I did. I spent 2 months building a new website, clean, elegant, academic. It included my teaching philosophy, sample syllabi, links to my writing. I updated my resume, polished my bio. I stayed up past midnight, refining the layout, obsessing over font pairings and color tones. It was the first thing in years that felt like me. Daniel never noticed, or if he did, he assumed it didn't matter. One night, I overheard him on the phone in his office. He was laughing. Deep, full, relaxed, the way he used to laugh with me. I leaned against the hallway wall and listened. I didn't cry. I felt nothing, just confirmation. The final piece came in late July. My former professor called again. "We'd like to offer you a 6-month residency," she said. "It comes with a stipend, housing, and a teaching load of 1 course per semester. If you want it, it's yours." I said yes. I didn't tell Daniel. I waited. In the days that followed, I began packing slowly. Not suitcases yet, but things that mattered. My books, my notebooks, the old flash drive. I began scanning important documents and backing up my files. I created digital copies of everything I'd rebuilt. He remained oblivious, too busy, too confident, too used to me being invisible. On August 9th, I mailed in the signed contract. On August 16th, I scheduled the moving service. On August 22nd, I booked my one-way flight to Maine. And on August 31st, I printed a letter. It was short, not bitter, just final. I left it on the dining table, next to the flowers he hadn't bought across from the chair he hadn't filled. Then I walked out. I didn't slam the door. I didn't announce my departure on social media. I just left. Quiet, composed, whole, and I didn't look back. I arrived in Maine just as the leaves began to turn. The campus was small and surrounded by woods with ivy-covered buildings and crisp air that smelled of pine. My apartment was modest, nestled in a faculty row house with creaky floors and large windows. It felt like a new beginning, earned, not gifted. The first week, I taught my seminar on moral responsibility in modern society. 10 students, engaged, curious, opinionated. After class, one stayed behind. "I looked up your blog," she said. "You write the way professors are supposed to write." I smiled. "Thank you," I said. "That means a lot." Back in Chicago, Daniel must have come home to silence. No note on the calendar, no emails, no trace of a fight. Just me. Gone. He texted that evening. "Where are you?" I didn't reply. The next day, "Are you okay? Please call me." Then, "Is this about Avery?" "We worked through that. I thought we were fine." I blocked his number. He emailed me a week later. Subject line, "Please." I read it once, then archived it. What was I supposed to say? That I'd watched him erase me piece by piece, and now I was whole without him? That he never once asked what I'd wanted for myself? The blog gained traction. A philosophy podcast invited me for an interview. Then came a request to contribute to an anthology. The essay I submitted, on autonomy, silence, and redefinition, was shared over 10,000 times. A quote from it ended up on a faculty bulletin board back in Boston. A former colleague emailed me, "Didn't know you were back in the game. Proud of you." In late October, Daniel showed up at my apartment. I didn't answer the door. I watched through the window as he stood on the porch, shifting from foot to foot. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, but something in his posture, uncertain, confused. He knocked again. "Lena," he said, "please, I didn't know you were unhappy." I wanted to laugh. I wanted to scream, but mostly I wanted him gone. I stepped outside, not to let him in, but to end it properly. "I was unhappy for years," I said, calm and steady. "You just never noticed." He reached for my arm. "You didn't tell me." "No," I interrupted. "I did. You just didn't listen." He blinked. "What is this? Revenge?" I paused. "No," I said. "This is recovery." He stared at me, waiting, but I had nothing else to say. I turned and went back inside, closed the door behind me, locked it once, then again. That night, I gave a guest lecture at a local library. I stood at the front of the room, holding a worn copy of Simone de Beauvoir's The Ethics of Ambiguity, and for the first time in years, I felt like myself. Not who I used to be, but who I had become. Winter came early that year. Snow covered the campus in a quiet, heavy hush. I'd walk to class with a thermos of tea, my boots crunching along the path, and think about how far I'd come from that high-rise in Chicago where my world had once felt so small. I didn't miss Daniel, not in the way people expect. I missed the version of myself who had believed in us, the woman who saw partnership as sacred, who bent and flexed for love, thinking it would be returned in kind. That kind of faith, when it breaks, it doesn't come back the same. But what did come back was my voice, my confidence, my ambition. I'd been afraid they were gone forever, but They were never gone, just silenced. In February, I got word that my essay had been shortlisted for a major philosophy award. It felt surreal. My name, my work, being recognized without any qualifiers or apologies. I called my parents. They cried. I didn't tell Daniel. The apartment in Chicago was no longer my concern. I let the lease expire. He'd renewed it in his name long before I left. I took only what I needed when I walked away. My books, my ideas, and the kind of clarity you only get when you lose everything you once compromised for. On a snowy afternoon, I mailed him a final envelope. Inside was my wedding ring, placed inside a small wooden box. I didn't include a note. I figured the silence would say enough. In March, I hosted my first solo lecture event. Over 100 attendees filled the room. I spoke about moral agency and the quiet power of reclaiming one's narrative. Afterward, a student approached me and said, "That didn't sound like theory. It sounded like your story." I smiled. Maybe it was. Maybe that was the point. If you've ever been erased in silence and rebuilt in secret, this story was for you. Share your own moment of quiet strength in the comments. And if you believe in rising without permission, subscribe, because we tell the stories they never saw coming.